Hey there, Seahawks. It's Miss Adams, and in this video, we're going to talk about geometric sequences. All right, a geometric sequence is a sequence of numbers in which the ratio, r, remains constant. And then a common ratio is found by dividing each term by its previous term. So you're going to take the second term and divide it by the first term to figure out what that common ratio is. All right, so the first four questions determine if the list of numbers represents a geometric sequence. If yes, find the common ratio. So this first one is yes, and to check it, I'm going to take the second term and divide it by the first. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. Then I'm going to check it with the third term divided by the second. That also gives me 5. So it's changing at a constant rate. So r is 5. All right, the next one. 135, 45, 15, 5. I'm going to take the second term, I'm going to take the third term divided by the second term. That gives me 1/3. Then I'm going to take the fourth term divided by the third term. That gives me 1/3. So yes, and r is 1/3, which means every time you're really dividing by 3 when you get a fraction. The next one, 18 divided by 6 is 3, and then 24 divided by 18 is not 3. It's 1.5. So that one is no, it is not a geometric sequence. The next one, if I take the second term, negative 14, and I divide it by the first term, 7, I get negative 2. And if I take the third term and divide it by the second term, I get also negative 2. So yes, this is geometric, and my ratio is negative 2. All right, given the geometric sequence, find the next 3 terms. So they're already telling me it's geometric. I just need to continue the pattern to get the next 3 numbers. So first I have to find r. So my first one, I'm going to take the second term and divide it by the first to figure out what my ratio is. 21 divided by 7 is negative 3. So then I'm going to take that third term and I'm going to multiply it by negative 3, which gives me negative 189. Then I'm going to take negative 189 and multiply it by negative 3, which gives me positive 567. I'm going to take that term, multiply it by negative 3, and that gives me negative 1,701. Okay? For the next one, I'm going to take the second term divided by the first term to figure out my common ratio. 4 divided by 8 is a half. So I'm multiplying by a half, so I can multiply by 0.5, or I could just divide everything by 2, because they mean the same thing. To multiply by a half and to divide by 2 are the same thing. So 2 times 0.5 is 1. 1 divided by 2 is 1/2. 1/2 divided by 2 is 1/4. Okay, and this is where you might want to know which fractions match with which decimals. There's going to be some basic common fractions that you should know. All right, on this one, if I take my second term and divide by my first, I get a common ratio of 1/4, which means every time I'm dividing by 4. So if I do 192 and I divide by 4, I get 48. If I do 48 and I divide by 4, I get 12. And if I do 12 and I divide by 4, I get 3. I also could have multiplied, instead of dividing by 4, I could have multiplied by 0.25. All right, the last one here, negative 25 divided by negative 5 gives me positive 5 as my common ratio. So I'm going to take every term and multiply by 5 to get the next term. Negative 125 times 5 is negative 625. Negative 625 times 5 is negative 3,125. And when I multiply that times 5, I get negative 15,625. All right, geometric sequence formula. So we're going to use this formula to find the nth term. So if they wanted us to find the 100th term, they wanted us to find the 8th term, they wanted us to find the 11th term, we could use this formula to find any term in the sequence. All right, so a sub n equals a sub 1 times my ratio raised to the n minus 1 power. A sub 1 stands for your first term, and r stands for your common ratio. Okay, and then in your calculator, to raise like your ratio to an exponent, you're going to have a button that looks like x to the y, or a little caret, or y to the x. Okay, and you would press, I'll talk about it in the next problem actually. So write the rules for the sequence, then find the 7th term. So first I need to find my ratio. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So it's going to be a sub n equals 3, the first term in the set, times the common ratio, 3, raised to the n minus 1 power. Now they want me to find the 7th term. So a sub 7 equals 3 times 3 to the 7 minus 1. I just plugged in 7 everywhere I had an n. 7 minus 1 would be 6. So I would do 3 to the 6th power, which means 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. Okay, I don't want to do that. I would rather just do 3 to the 6, like just plug it in your calculator. So you would press 3, then you'd press that x to the y button, then you'd press 6, then you'd press equals, and that would give you what 3 to the 6 is, and then you'd multiply that by 3, and you should get 2,187. All right, negative 4, 20, negative 100. My ratio is negative 5. So my equation, my formula for my geometric sequence is my first term, negative 4, times my ratio, negative 5. Because it's a negative, I put it in parentheses, and then raised to the n minus 1. Now I'm going to find the 7th term. So everywhere I have an n, I plug in 7. 7 minus 1 becomes 6. So I'm going to do negative 5 to the 6th power. So negative 5 xy button 6 equals, and then multiply by negative 4, and that gives me 62,500. All right, our next sequence, my common ratio is 200 divided by 400, which is a half. So a sub n equals my original term, my first term, 400, times my ratio, raised to the n minus 1. If I want to find the 7th term, I'm going to plug 7 in everywhere I have an n. 7 minus 1 becomes 6. So I'm going to do 0.5 xy 6 and then multiply by 400. I get 6.25. Okay, anytime you have a fraction as your common ratio, your number is always going to get smaller. All right, this one, my common ratio would be 5. So my equation is going to be 1 times 5 to the n minus 1. The 7th term, I'll plug 7 in for n. 7 minus 1 is 6. So this would be 5 to the 6 times 1, which is just 5 to the 6, which gives me 15,625. All right, that's it.